Right, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of us exploring the lore of Bloodborne and comparing and contrasting the English version of the game text to what we can find in the Japanese. If you're interested in where I'm pulling my sources from, I do have a spreadsheet linked to the bottom of my channel description where you could go and look for yourself at all of the kinds of retranslations that I've done. I've also added Arukimania's translations of the Japanese text onto there as well, so you don't just always have to take my word for things. So if you do know Japanese and you have any comments you want to make or insights about that, my sheets are also editable or commentable, and if you want to have a more involved conversation, feel free to DM me on Twitch, YouTube, or whatever platform you're viewing this on. So yesterday we went through Yahar'gul and the first section of Cathedral Ward, the part that has like the abandoned old workshop and everything like that. I actually died a lot in Yahar'gul and I was a little bit confused why, but it dawned on me later that part of it is just because I was wearing like the foreign garb set and its defenses are absolutely garbage. So today we'll be exploring the rest of the Cathedral Ward and probably Hemwick Charnel Lane, and if there's more time after that, we'll begin to go into the Forbidden Woods. So, with that out of the way, it seems like the doll is up there. Maybe we'll be lucky and get her special dialogue. No, but that's okay.
Welcome. What? Very well. Good.
So once we go into Cathedral Ward, we're gonna go kind of hang around and talk to the different NPCs and start sending them to the chapel as well. We've already talked to Eileen, and on this run of the game, we aren't going to go and help her kill Henrik, so that way we can fight her in the Grand Cathedral later on. And so right now, we should have Adella, who's arrived in the chapel, and that's the nun we saved from Yahar'gul, who is cowering behind some urns.
Oh, brave hunter, you're alive. Thank you very much. The town is in disarray, but there are still people here. Together we await the help of the healing church. I cannot begin to express my gratitude to you. The only thing that I can offer is my own lowly blood, if it would suffice.
So right now, Adella is offering us her blood. There are a few small differences in Japanese. In the English, they always say that it's like a blood ministration. For her line right now, she says she can offer her own lowly blood, but in Japanese, she says that she'll be offering us the alms of blood, and that becomes a bit relevant when we talk to Ariana later, who will ask us if we hate women who sell their blood in Japanese. And so the reason why I bring this up now is alms are like a kind of a religious term for charity. So essentially, Adella will give her blood away for free, and Ariana will be able to sell it, which shouldn't make a ton of sense, because if the healing church is giving away their blood, why would someone choose to buy it? The answer, in my opinion, would be Ariana's blood must be of a higher quality, and we'll talk a bit about that more later as well.
Yes, of course. Come in close. Now, take my blood. Brave hunter, please give me a little more time? There are others in need of my blood.
Alright, so that's pretty much it for her dialogue right now. In the Japanese, she does mention that she's like one of the laity, or like one of the members of the healing church, probably like a lower ranked one, which does seem to fall in line with her character. And now that we've gotten her blood vial, let's go ahead and examine that. So this is blood taken from Adella, nun of the healing church. Restores an amount of HP, then continues to gradually restore HP for a short time. The healing church nuns are chosen for their merit as vessels for blood, and groomed as blood saints. The mere chance of being treated with their blood lends legitimacy to the healing church and communion. I think for the most part, the Japanese on that was similar. It does mention that these are like the blood alms of Adella, so it kind of keeps that language consistent in the Japanese version of the text, and it's a little bit removed from English, unfortunately. And the idea that the healing church grooms women or cultivates women to become blood saints is pretty interesting. It shows that there are a certain class of women who are able to receive the blood, and it will kind of alter their physical makeup in such a way that they are able to continue to produce that kind of blood. Excuse me. And Adella seems to have been a success at that, and when we encounter Adeline in the Research Hall DLC portion of the game, it shows that like not everyone was successful for that, I believe, and Adella and Adeline are both like blood saints of the healing church, and so they're able to provide ministration for the common Yharnamite. And because of their ability to kind of produce the blood, it increases the standing of the church in the eyes of the commoners, and lends support that the healing church has the power over Yharnam itself, because it creates a kind of reliance on the healing church to receive that blood, and it also supports their standing as well. When we talk to Ariana later, we'll have to use Adella's blood vial first for her to drop hers. Or give us her blood, rather. I'm surprised that guy got aggroed. Some more twins. I think I need a few more to finish up the upgrades on this. And so we're going to go back up to that one gate that we opened. Oh. And now we can see that there are like a bunch of the eyes on the lanterns that I talked about the previous streams. Now that we have over 15 insight. Their attack patterns have changed. They're able to use these kind of cosmically arcane attacks. And they're less likely to use their kind of melee attacks now. So that is a really interesting mechanic as far as like the insight is concerned, because for whatever reason, having the insight does seem to change the kind of attacks and damage the player can receive from enemies. So before you have 15 insight, like this dude who has the flaming scythe, his scythe will just be of a kind of normal variant, and it won't do like a type of fire damage to the player. But once you do have that 15 insight, the style of damage does change, and that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. You'd almost think that if it were to be the case that insight allows one to see more, that the damage would have been consistent the entire time. And so these guys do patrol, and I was trying to hide off in the back. I should have been more in the corner, I suppose. Becomes a little bit more tedious to try to deal with them with the lantern guy having his arcane attacks. Because it can interrupt like the timing window on the viscerals. And then there's another church servant over here, and he wields like a repeating pistol. That didn't show it off very well, unfortunately, but it does fire 2 bullets, like right there. And it is like the kind of what like the quintessential church firearm, it seems, for like these kind of church servants and church hunters at times. Oh, that's bad. And so once we get into like the interior section of the Cathedral Ward behind the gates, there will be a lot more of the church giants roaming around, which just shows that this area is much more like heavily guarded, because it is like the stronghold of the healing church's control. And coming into this like cemetery over here, there's going to be a lot of corpses that have like madman's knowledges. I don't know if there is a kind of a cosmic event which caused them to go mad like that. Or if it's just a place that the healing church would try to farm knowledge from, or the madman's knowledge is from. It's a little bit weird. Especially since like the corpses are above ground. Since Adella does try to give us that madman's knowledge when we find it in Yharnamite, it wouldn't really surprise me if the healing church did try to create like a system to harvest a lot of it, but I don't really think that's likely. And I think this is just kind of something that can't really be explained very well from a lore perspective. Especially when you compare it to something like all the corpses around the brain of Mensis. The last time we did do a lore through, I showed that this gate can be opened from the other side when you have the Hunter Chief emblem, and when you have 50 points of insight, you can see that there will be a bunch of messengers gathered around this lever. When you hold up the emblem, they will pull this lever and cause it to open. Without them, it looks like it'll just open on its own, like the lever will just go on its own. So there is that kind of other facet to the benefits of having many points of insight. You do get a bit more of a complete perspective as to the state of the world. And so this statue over here resembles the statue we find in the tomb of Erden. So I wonder if this is supposed to represent Erden, and if the healing church kind of just took over this area in Yharnam, and it already had like an endemic religion to begin with, and they just used all of the architecture for their own devices. It would kind of make sense, because it seems like it would take an awfully long time to completely like construct a large portion of the city based off of the healing church religion, especially since we can still encounter like the very founders of that religion via Gehrman in the Dream and Willem of Bergenworth later on. So there is a bit of a contention to that, though, because Willem may have been like transfigured by some unknown thing, and Gehrman's physical body might be in the dream and might be sustained by that dream. So some of these church servants will also be wielding the flame sprayers, as we just saw. And the statues in the Cathedral Ward are still pretty consistent with what we've seen around the rest of Yharnam. I don't think there's anything too significant over here. When we get into like the Hemwick area of the game, the kind of tombstones we find here will be a bit more primitive in nature. These ones also seem to be more modern compared to the ones that we found in the lower portion of the Cathedral Ward over by the abandoned workshop. So I don't think there's like a ton of significance, but that could lead into the argument that this area might have been built up later than other portions of Yharnam. And of course we have a bunch of caskets attached to wagons, so it seems like the healing church is in the business of carting around bodies and potentially harvesting like either bones or blood gems or other kinds of ritual materials. Coming here, we will find some more caskets and barrels and things like that. And on one of the residences here, there's going to be a sigil of like a lion or a griffin-like thing. Oh, this one is much clearer. There's a lion. And this is the residence of Ariana, a descendant of Cainhurst, so that could just be a good environmental tie between her origins and what we'll find later on.
My, what a queer scent. But I'd take it over the stench of blood and beasts any day. What is it then? I'm off during hunts, and besides, this is no place for ladies. Wouldn't want to drag you down too.
So that final portion of her dialogue is gendered. If you're a male, instead of saying, I'm off during hunts and besides it's no place for ladies, she wouldn't want to drag us down too. She'll say, I'm off during hunts, so if that's what you're here for, I'll leave you to your own devices. If that doesn't do it, come back in the morning, darling. So Ariana is a woman of the night, a whore, or a prostitute, and she does mention that the scent of the player does differ from blood and beasts. She's the second person to remark on our scent. The first was Gascoigne's little girl, if you did her quest. And so there is something about the hunter that is different from beasts and blood, obviously, and we don't know exactly what that is. I think it could be potentially related to like the blood echoes that we carry around and the ones that we inherit as we go through the night of the hunt. But that's just a bit of conjecture on that part.
Oh, thank goodness. You're a hunter, aren't you, dear? Might you know of a safe place? The night is long and very little of the incense left. Please, there must be some nice place to run off to.
So we can tell her to go to Yosefko's clinic and turn her into a blueberry and end her quest prematurely, or we can tell her to go to Erden Chapel. So that's what we're going to do, because we're going to try to have her get killed to Adella this playthrough.
Oh, thank you, dear. Perhaps I'll see you there.
Alright, so I did forget to mention, when instead of like saying this is no place for ladies in English, or sorry, in the Japanese version of the game, she says something closer to like, if you come like too close, you will end up like becoming impure. And this idea of impurity is strongly tied to the clan of Cainhurst, the Blood Clan, because they're referred to as like the impure Blood Clan. So there is a lot more consistency in the Japanese text between like that idea of impurity and Cainhurst, and it just gets reinforced a little bit by Ariana's own dialogue. So she does almost seem to have like some implicit knowledge that she's impure, probably because she's from like a cainhurst descent as opposed to just being like a woman of the night.
Oh, thank you, dear. Perhaps I'll see you there.
So that's it for that portion. I should have turned the HUD off earlier. And then there's another NPC in this area.
You! You're not from around here, are you? Well, an outsider who's come to join the hunt? What a pathetic idea. You what? What, you think I'm a beast? Well, maybe I think you're a beast. And step away from my castle!
So, the man in this room is what we call like the suspicious man, or the narrow-minded man, because he doesn't ever really seem to believe what the hunter tells him. He kind of gives an opposite take on reality for almost anything you talk to him about. So, the last portion in Step Away from My Castle, that's just a bit of flowery language, like your home is your castle, and he's the king of his castle. The Japanese is just a little bit more plain, and it's just like, get away from my home, essentially.
Oh, enough of you. What, you think this is funny? Well, I certainly don't, so be gone with you. I'll have nothing to do with your beast sons. What's this two-bit nonsense you're peddling? I heard you told that wench about some shelter. Well, she's a damn fool to trust an outsider. Why? Well, her sort's probably just fixing to feed some of your coin.
So, as it's pretty clear, he was kind of eavesdropping on our conversation with Ariana. His final line right there has a really marked difference in Japanese. He says something like, "I can see it's not just her loins which are loose, her wits are too." So that's one hell of a burn, really. Really kind of just shows his disdain for her profession, and kind of the shaming of that in general.
Alright. What crafty lies does the outsider have today? You think I'm an easy mark? Yeah? Well, give me your best shot.
So we can tell him to go to the chapel or the clinic, or no place at all. No matter what you tell him to go to, he will always try to go to the opposite location. So if we wanted to send him to the chapel, we needed to tell him to go to the clinic, and vice versa. So that's what we're going to do. So this way we can potentially have like the suspicious beggar feast on this guy later. The last playthrough we sent him to the Yosefka's clinic just to kind of show off like what she does when NPCs get sent to her.
Huh. Yeah, sorry. Too sharp for that bollocks. I know a superstition when I hear one. Outsiders. Even their lies are predictable.
So if you did want to change your mind and send him to a different location, you could talk to him again. And as long as you say the opposite of where you intend him to go, like that'll be the last one that he goes with.
What? Still preying on folks with your book of lies? Yeah, fine. Come on, show me what you got. Tell me about your little safe place.
And so that's pretty much it.
Yeah, sorry. Too sharp for that bollocks. I know a superstition when I hear one. Outsiders. Even their lies are predictable.
So those two NPCs will go to the chapel. We will be able to talk to them later after reloading the area or dying. So there are some like patrolling Yharnamites in this area. It's kind of clouded by fog, and then there's also like these kind of beast boys that I call, who are also parts of the patrol. And this is like the first area where you really see them working in much closer proximity together, and they do seem to have like a defined path which they patrol together. So there's some more NPCs down here as well. These ones won't join us in the safe areas. So let's see what they have to say.
Oh, we've the deepest gratitude for the church and all they do for us. The deepest, widest gratitude, yes. Yes.
So this woman does have that kind of like a nervous laughter that seems to go a little bit too far. That shows like she's probably at the edge of sanity, and that'll become relevant later as we progress the state of the night and show that the denizens of Yharnam do go progressively more insane as the night goes on, rather.
Oh, did...
Praise you. Praise the old damn church. And best of luck hunting. Best luck of all.
So we can hear like a kind of pounding noise coming from this residence, and it seems like both of the people we've just talked to have a bit of a either sarcastic tone, or they're just trying to say something to get the hunter off their back, and or members of the healing church off their back. Seems like they're really trying to keep their noses down and stay out of trouble, and that I believe will become relevant when we look at this set, or it might be one of the other ones later on. So this is the black church set. And most of the descriptions are similar. It's the gloves which differ, so we're going to go ahead and look at the garb since it has more. This is attire of the Healing Church Hunters. The holy shawl, symbol of the Healing Church, flutters proudly on their backs. Most Healing Church Hunters are elementary doctors who understand the importance of early prevention of the scourge, achieved by disposing of victims, and even potential victims, before signs of sickness manifest themselves. Their black attire is synonymous with fear and that peculiar Yharnam madness. I do have a decent amount to say about this. The real implication here is, since those who are afflicted by the scourge of the beast project their beasthood onto others, this could imply that if a black church-garbed hunter was wearing this attire and they were afflicted by the scourge, they could potentially kill normal humans with impunity. So that could have built up some distrust between the normal citizens and the healing church over the time. There isn't a ton of evidence to confirm that, though. That's just pretty likely speculation, I believe. And there might be a little bit more support from that, from like the harrowed garb, I believe it is, that Simon wears in the DLC. Let me just try to compare the Japanese. The idea that they're, preventative hunters is said somewhere else. I don't remember the other description that we saw. Maybe it was on one of the messenger items. So, like, they have the authority to go ahead and being afflicted by the scourge of beasts, which is pretty problematic, all things considered, and it just really shows the kind of tyrannical power the healing church wields in this game. So the final line is the black attire is synonymous with fear and that peculiar Yharnam madness. In Japanese, it says it's the black attire is a thing of Yharnam's evening madness. I like that line because the idea that the madness is tied to the night and potentially the moon, I think is a pretty good flavor text for like keeping things in line with like werewolves and all that sort of thing. So these are the surgical long gloves. They are white surgical gloves. The intricate embroidery weaves a spell that protects their wearer. The church engages in the hunt in a medical capacity. When a cancer is discovered, one must pinpoint its location, reach in, and wrench it from the host's bosom. So that final line, or the final paragraph rather, does differ quite a bit. I do like the English probably more than the Japanese. I think it gives it like a lot of good imagery, which can be tied to hunters and like the visceral attacks. The Japanese is a little bit closer to something like the hunts of the church are a kind of medical activity where direct contact and extraction are important. And so that idea of extraction literally means like to pick something out, and so it's meant in more of like a surgical context in the Japanese. So I mean, for the most part, the semantics are nearly the same. I think the English just gives it a better flavor and more relevance to like hunters and visceral attacks. Oh, and I mentioned the pounding of this guy. I don't think I mentioned that he might be like banging his head on the wall in a similar way that Yamamura does in the kind of a little jail leading up to the research hall in the DLC. So it could just be a repeated symptom of like, the people of Yharnam going mad at different times. And so you hear that guy just say, like, where'd the beast go? That just goes to reinforce the idea that these Yharnamites believe that the hunter is a beast because they are projecting their own, like, transformed beasthood onto the player. That terrible sound above us is coming from a brain sucker and a crow. We'll encounter that a little bit later because we can't get to it from this side. So going back and examining like some of the buildings of this area, we see that things are a lot more cramped together. This shows it's a bit more of a residential portion of the town, and there do seem to be like some shop signs here as well. Like this is like the saw looking like thing the Beast Boys carry around. But there's still like the coffins and griffins everywhere. I do like on this building you get these kind of statues here. I don't know if there's a real life equivalent to it. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think it has like a ton of significance to the lore of the game. You might be able to argue, oh, maybe that's Lawrence or a prominent hunter of the Healing Church, maybe Ludwig when he was still a human. But nothing really concrete there. We do see some gigantic bells as well. And they do have like a lot of religious significance for the Healing Church, although it's not explained so much in the game. Like there will be the choir bell and like the beckoning bell and that sort of thing, but you don't really get like a whole lot of like plain text descriptions talking about the rules beyond just like summoning hunters across planes of dimensions and that. And so if we were exploring Cathedral Ward for the first time and we didn't know where to go, like to get to the Grand Cathedral, and we were just doing all this exploring, and we ended up going towards like the Forbidden Woods and hearing about a password, this note would be a bit more relevant, but I didn't do that quite yet, so it just says, a watchman of Bergenworth guards the gate with a password, the secret adage of the Grand Cathedral. So this reveals to us that in order to get into the Forbidden Woods, we would need to know that adage in the Grand Cathedral to get past that gatekeeper. So this brings us back to where the church servants were from earlier, and like we fought the giant over there, the scythe-wielding guy here, and the repeating pistol one over there. Some more thick cold blood. And going back towards that brain sucker and that crow, just to kind of show off what I was talking about. Oh wow, was not expecting the one shot there. So the Brainsuckers are extremely resistant to slashing damage, and they're very weak to thrust damage and blood tinge damage. So the threaded cane does have that kind of a slight advantage over them just by using the R2 and stabbing them. So the crow gives us a pebble, and the Brainsucker gives us some quicksilver bullets. And this one's posed for us quite nicely. They do have like this necklace on them. We can't really make it out very well, but there's really not a whole lot we can talk about them. Maybe I can show it off. If you look towards like the center of its head, there's like that line. Later on, you can see like the phantasms will pop out of the Brainsucker's skull, and they'll retract back into their skulls, and that line just kind of shows like there was a surgery done to them to make them that way, so they're not like a kind of natural creature in this Bloodborne universe. Some more twins. That should be enough to upgrade our weapon. And so, I don't think I've mentioned it yet in this playthrough, but I know Redgrave, another lore theorist, has said that you can only find like child-sized coffins in the orphanage. But here we can definitely find at least one here and another, although this could be argued that it's like for medical supplies or some other kinds of supplies or rations. But I just wanted to highlight that he does get quite a few details wrong, unfortunately, and you should always take like every lore theorist with a grain of salt, and myself included. I try to be very clear of like when I'm conjecturing or speculating, and not everybody does that, so generally take the game's material first and then supplementary material after that. So we get a gemstone from this guy, and Alfred will appear here later on when we are able to access the Forbidden Woods, but nothing yet. We get some antidotes, and this will be the gatekeeper for the Forbidden Woods, which that one note was just talking about.
The password.
So we don't know the password yet, so we can only keep quiet.
The password.
So he really has like a lot of interesting muttering that goes along with that, mostly about the door. The password gatekeeper has a lot of cut dialogue, which I find to be very, very interesting. Most of it is a bit more related to like Willem as his master, he'll reveal later on, so I'm just going to go ahead and read some of it now to give us a little bit of that missing flavor. He says, if you do tell him the password, he says, I don't know how a hunter learned the password, but let me say this much. Down the embankment, beyond the forest, there it stands, Old Bergenworth, but it's not what you think. They don't welcome newcomers, and their knowledge is better left untouched. No, the old college is not what it once was. Those who entered never return, at least not as who they were upon entering. Don't say you weren't warned. I cannot stop anyone who knows the password. I can only warn them. So go on, visitor, for that's what the master wishes of you. Sometimes, master's whims are most mystifying. I cannot stop anyone who knows the password. You are free to go. And so, his master in that dialogue right there is Willem in the earlier version of the game, the content text. And so after the blood moon, he says, Ah, nightmare is upon us. Is this your doing, great master? Does it mean that my work is done? And then he just moans a bit more. He talks about the password, and that's pretty much it for that. Then there's another portion of his dialogue where he says, Ah, my first visitor in a year. Ah, my first visitor in a decade. Half a century. Oh, a whole century. So that is probably like one of the only indicators of a potential timeline of the game, and as you can see, like it really doesn't help out a whole lot because it continues to scale, so at least 100 years may have passed within the game, but possibly longer than that. But just as a reminder, that is cut dialogue and is probably cut for a reason. So whether or not the Healing Church has been around for over 100 years, and whether Willem has been like in a kind of a vegetative state for 100 years or so is a bit up in the air. At that time in the development, the character for Willem was a bit more ingrained with Mikolash, so that puts a little bit more context into place in relation to like his comment about the nightmares being upon them. Because if Mikolash was Willem at that point in development, you get that. Oh no, that's not good. I'm gonna die. Okay, so it's not too terrible. I totally interrupted myself because I forgot about those guys being up there. So what was I saying about the timeline? Oh yeah, Mikolash could have been like the same character as Willem at that point in development, so the Nightmare of Mensis could have been related to Willem as well, and so his text about the nightmare being upon them could have been as a result of their combined identity. And so I also think that Mikolash / Willem could have potentially been the reference to that lost master in the note within the Certain Chapel and the Bergenworth Spider. So now that we did unfortunately die, we can see that Ariana and the narrow-minded man have entered the chapel itself, and we can talk to them.
Oh, hello, dear. You weren't lying. This is a safe place. Thank you. I am in your debt. I'd like to tender my thanks, but I can't imagine what to offer. All I can give is my blood. But would you even take a whore's blood?
And so I've mentioned that line a few times. Originally in Japanese, that final line about taking a whore's blood was gendered. She would only say that to a male. Hold on, let me double check. Okay, so she says, "Do you hate a whore's blood?" to females, and to males instead she says, "Do you hate a woman who sells blood?" Which is the kind of like smoking gun that her blood must have been of a higher quality than compared to Adella's. So if we try to take her blood for now, we can't because we have Adella's in our inventory. So in order to proceed with that, we'll go ahead and take the blood of Adella. You see there's that kind of a fiery effect on us, but that's about it. When we talk to Ariana and use her blood vial, it'll have like a chiming sound effect which accompanies it.
Oh, you. I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can't help. Unless you've had a change of heart. Oh, good. Come close, dear. I'm always happy to help.
So now that we've gotten the blood of Ariana, it says that it's blood taken from Ariana, Cathedral Ward, Woman of Pleasure. The sweet blood of Ariana restores HP and temporarily speeds stamina recovery. A member of the old healing church would know that her blood is similar indeed to precisely what was once forbidden. And so that idea of forbidden blood or whatever is the real hint that the reason that the healing church might have wanted to raid Cainhurst could have been because they had a higher tier of blood, and it could have like endangered their monopolization over the blood and blood saints, especially since Ariana would sell her blood as well as being like a woman of the night, a prostitute. That would just show like a real threat to the healing church's control, I believe. Okay, and this is also described as the blood alms of Ariana in Japanese, so I suppose there is like a little bit of a ambiguity or inconsistency rather than I would have thought initially, in that it almost seems implied that Ariana's blood is freely given as well. Or maybe it just means that in this context, which she freely gave it to the player. I'm not entirely sure. So let's go ahead and use this, because we'll need to use a couple of them to pique Adella's jealousy. So that's that kind of chiming effect that I was talking about, and it should be that if you talk to Ariana, you can kind of see Adella peeking out.
Oh, hello. Sorry, dear.
And eavesdropping on our conversations.
I've only so much blood, okay?
And then when you get closer, we'll talk about that.
Forgive.
Right, so that...
Oh, brave hunter. I pray for your safety.
That concludes Ariana and Adella stuff for now. And so, Sundry Saturn, welcome back to the stream. Nice to see you again. And now we can talk to that narrow-minded man behind the window from earlier.
Ah, you. The swindling off-comer. Did you really think that'd work? There's no fooling me. Now, off with you. You heard me. Go away. I can't stand the stench of your lying breath. I'll spare you one nugget of advice. Beware the lady of the night. I can see it in her eyes. She deeply resents the young saint. She hears people whisper. She knows what people think of her. Yes. She despises the saint for having what she doesn't. Bloody wench, they should have moved her on ages ago.
And so, as I mentioned earlier when we first encountered this man, he tends to give the exact opposite information that's relevant to the player. So it's Adella that is jealous of Ariana, because despite Ariana's like low status as a prostitute, her blood is of a higher quality, and Adella has this kind of complex where she considers herself like inferior to others, and so it drives her insane that someone who should be of a lower social status to her is being fraternized with by the hunter, someone whom she reveres.
I'll spare you one nugget of advice. Beware the blind man. There the beggar sits at the bottom of the bloody food chain, and then he's here acting like he owns the place. He's not to be trusted. What's he want with all those people anyway? That little weasel has a murky past, I'm telling you.
So, for the Chapel Dweller, he is like the most altruistic NPC, the one that seeks to save everyone. So again, the narrow-minded man's take on the Dweller is completely off base. There's a small difference in the Japanese. Like in English, he calls him the beggar at the bottom of the bloody food chain, which I do like quite a bit. Instead, he calls him more like a cockroach, like peasant. So the Japanese is a little bit stronger on like the insult side of the text, but I think overall it does a very good job of like conveying his disdain through the voice acting itself.
Oh, give it a rest, please. I've no time for your petty lies. What? Just go away now. I can't stand the stench of your lying breath.
So that final line there is really well translated in general. Like the Japanese is a little bit stilted. It's more like the stench from your foul lies is spreading. So like saying the stench of your lying breath is sounds very natural in English and really gets that point across very well, in my opinion. And then before I forget, we should also talk to the little chapel dweller, because you'll be overjoyed that we've got more folk to have joined us.
Oh, the hunter. Alive and well at that. Another one you sent made it here safe and sound. This place is a haven now for so many. Thanks to you. I'm overjoyed, really, that you'd even give me the time of day. I don't suppose there's anybody out there worth saving anymore, but you did all you could. And so many owe you so much. Amazing, really. Not because you're a hunter, but because you're you. Makes me think, once dawn breaks, maybe I can just, start over. Makes it easier to bear all of this, you see. You've made life easier. Thank you.
So his dialogue is a pretty good hint that what other NPCs we may encounter are not necessarily proper, and I mean that in terms of like a mental state, like they're not quite sane or safe, and that might become a bit more relevant later on once we go into like the Forbidden Woods and encounter the suspicious beggar. He says like we've saved everyone, so that's a pretty big hint that the beggar isn't exactly who he seems. And so I also should have talked to the chapel dweller before rescuing Ariana and the narrow-minded man, rather, because he does have like a little bit of unique dialogue for each of them, and so I kind of overlooked that as we played. But that's about it for now. Sundry did say that the narrow-minded man does kind of have like similar features as the old lady. Like their faces are a bit, I don't want to say like misshapen, but like they're like a little bit like lopsided almost, and it's very intentionally done. It's super obvious, like when you look at the face sliders on Maps Wiki. Oh, I didn't mean to point, I meant to sit down. So like her nose is crooked, her eyes are like droopy, and one of them is like discolored, I think it is. It's a little bit hard to make out. But yeah, that does seem to be like an endemic to like the citizens of Yharnam, but it doesn't really seem to be like affecting like the Blood Saints. So it's a little bit unfortunate we don't get like a better look at more like lower class NPCs to like kind of flesh that out a bit more. So you just kind of have to rely on the face slider data from the wiki and go with that. So I'm not going to worry about these enemies too much right now. But now that we did open that big gate, this will allow us to summon an old hunter, Henriette. She wields the Kirk hammer and the repeating pistol, which you can get from the what's it called? The Saw Hunter? No, not the Saw Hunter badge. The Sword Hunter badge from defeating the Cleric Beast. And so a lot of people like to believe that maybe Henriette is related to the Cleric Beast. Oh, that's not good. So these church servants right here have these kind of crucifixes that exude this like red aura, and they are in the shape of a hunter's mark. Oh no, that's not cool. Oh, and I got a grab attack. That kind of makes it worth it, I suppose. I'm gonna get frenzied. And so I think it's a possibility that like the crucifixes are intentionally in the shape of the hunter's rune, and maybe that shape in and of itself has like a kind of arcane power attached to it, and that's what that aura is about. If you don't have the 15 insight, you won't be able to see it. So this is the Grand Cathedral, and I'll explore more of that later. I'm just gonna go off to the side area. Maybe I shouldn't even do this yet, now that I think about it. Yeah, okay. I'm just gonna go off to Hemwick instead. And we can go towards this area if we decide to do the lecture hall or later on. Oh no, that's not good. Nah, I'm gonna die. I won't blame my armor set on that. That's just poor play on my part. So one of the reasons why I do like to go to Hemwick before defeating Amelia is it'll kind of it won't like advance the night cycle more, so in like the literal sense of the word, but like the NPCs do start to get affected, and really the main reason is just to kind of go for the Caroll Rune workshop tool. I really don't know these guys' attacks. Because there's only like 2 of them in the game. So that's the Grand Cathedral. We won't go in there quite yet. Along the way there are just some of the normal types of statues that we've seen so far throughout the game. Coming up here we get a clearer view of the orphanage. And I did mention before, like, how they would burn bones and cremated ashes for, like, their incense. So there is, like, these smokestacks coming off the top of the orphanage. I have wondered whether or not these smokestacks are cremating the remains of people, and that might serve as, like, a larger kind of a beast-warding incense throughout this area, because there aren't a ton of the beasts in the Cathedral Ward. We will see like a whole bunch of like the incense urns around Cathedral Ward anyway, but like this foggy kind of area right here, I do wonder if that's supposed to be like thematically related to that. So we get a bloodshot eyeball heading towards Hemwick, and this is one of the first ritual materials that we can get. And some material used in a holy chalice ritual is an exquisite eyeball removed quickly after death, or perhaps even before, used to unlock the seal of the old labyrinth Hintertombs. And that does indeed open the way to the Hintertomb labyrinth style, and it does tie into like how like the boss of the next area is essentially an eye collector. Looking up here, we can see like there's this kind of wooden sign that says Hemwick. It's really hard to make out, which leads into the Hemwick Charnel Lane, and that's where they seem to collect bodies for cremation and potential like harvesting for ritual materials like the bloodshot eyeball. So coming into Hemwick, there's like this adjoining cemetery that's kind of annoying to deal with because there's going to be a lot of snipers and dogs along the way. No. Okay. And when you get like in super close range to the snipers, their guns do a ton of damage. to choose that, and that failed. So, Devin guy, it's nice to see you again. Welcome back to another stream. We've already just gone through like the main portion of Cathedral Ward, got Ariana and Adella. We compared their blood vials. And we also sent the narrow-minded man to the chapel as well. I'll try to feed him to the suspicious beggar later on, and maybe, well, I guess Adella won't work, but... So once we get rid of these snipers, I'll try to like look at the dogs. That's nice, just one R2. Get rid of that guy. Oh, I don't think I've ever actually triggered that before. I didn't even know that there were oil urns over here. It's really cool. Trying to think of my logistics here. See, close up like that, I almost just died from the 2 hits. It certainly doesn't help that I'm wearing like the foreign garb set, but they do a lot more damage when you're closer to them. So we get some more bone marrow ash, which does connect it to Hemwick Charnel Lane in that item description. I'll just go ahead and read it again, since it's relevant. Additional medium that strengthens quicksilver bullets. According to the workshop, this is a special bone marrow ash collected from Hemwick Charnel Lane, and valuable to hunters with weak blood tinge who require the use of stronger firearms. I did mention before, the last time we looked at it, that the bone marrow is a combustible in real life, so this isn't just like a kind of like made-up fantasy item for once. So, where were one of those dogs? So this is a beast hunting dog. If you look closely to it, it's got like a bunch of like spikes attached to cloth that have been tied around its body. It's got the same kind of things like attached to its front paws. So it's got like additional, almost like Freddy Krueger-esque claws that they can like use their front paws for attacks. It's a little bit novel, because like a normal dog in real life will not like try to swipe at a person with its front legs. So Devin says, despite their appearance and behavior, they are still good boys. Some more of the bone marrow ash. Alright, and so now that that area is like mostly cleaned out, I'm gonna go ahead and point out like the graveyard here is filled with like these kind of older style tombs or gravestones. Never really know what to call these. Like what the real difference is between like a grave and a tombstone, or like a gravestone is. And so one thing that does interest me is like this design of a flower at the top of them. I think it personally resembles the one of the flowers that you can see growing in like the little garden-esque courtyards in the Chalice dungeons. And so this area does seem to be older when we compare it to like that little plaza type graveyard within the Grand Cathedral. So I just did want to point that out. And it seems like when you come to Hemwick, it is a bit of a more rural and a more agrarian setting in general. and that Yharnam has like the bigger civilization. But there's also a good possibility that like Hemwick would have been like a town that was a part of Cainhurst and essentially outside of the castle gates, or maybe even like outside of like the castle inner gates, and these might be like the castle outer gates or something along those lines. And so if you do come here after defeating Vicar Amelia and it becomes the full night phase, there will be these kind of enemies that will spawn out of the ground. They're essentially like made out of like a black nightmarish mist. They're called Mad Ones, and you'll see them if you have 15 insight, and it's the full night phase. So it is a little bit incentivized to come to Hemwick even before the Grand Cathedral, even though like the Cathedral is definitely like the more direct route to the next boss and like the next intended like location as far as the lore goes. Like Hemwick and Cainhurst beyond it are completely optional. So we're gonna just go back to the dream and maybe get lucky with the dull dialogue, or maybe that only happens after I don't quite remember. Lance McDonald did a really good video talking about all those triggers for that. So no luck.
Welcome. What is it? Very well. Let.
Cameron should still be gone. The last stream we did manage to see him at the back of the workshop, but no such luck this time around. Oh wow, it's a lot better gem. And I don't think he'll still be here, but we'll see. Alright, nope, he's gone. So that'll be it for here. Yeah, screw it. And then we get access to Hemwick through a different kind of a tombstone. I don't think there's a ton of significance to that, but maybe there is, and somebody else could figure that out. And just as a reminder, if you guys do have lore questions or want to bring up something that I might have missed, definitely feel free. Of course, sometimes I monologue a bit long and that can go over, but I definitely won't mind, and I'll get to it when I can. So coming into Hemwick, we find a bunch of women, which is a bit of a first for Bloodborne. And kind of like Souls games in general, there really aren't like a lot of female, just like trash mobs. Although I suppose that's just a terrible phrasing that I just used right there. And they're kind of dancing as though they're already like half mad. They have like more agrarian tools like butcher cleavers, torches, and like almost like hoes, like the gardening tool, but I don't really know what they're called. Like whatever the heck this thing is, which I keep forgetting to like look up to figure out what it is. So the next like little woman over here will be wearing or wielding one of those as well. So you can see like it's almost like it's branded or like on fire. I can't think of what the real word for that is. And then this area is still filled with like a bunch of graves. We've got like a stretcher, and right next to the stretcher there's a corpse on a guillotine. And from this corpse we can get another bloodshot eyeball. And just as a bit of a note that's not really like too important, this skeleton's asset does get reused in the fishing hamlet. Like they'll be in like the little canoes that line the hamlet. But the guillotine is a very different touch. You really don't see a lot of them throughout the game. So I like to just show off like those kind of unique things that I've realized or like noticed. And it looks like there's little spikes on the bed of it, which is interesting. So it doesn't look like the little pyres here are made out of bones, like we can find in some of the other areas. There don't seem to be like the beasts hanging around here either, but there are like a ton of like hanged men all throughout the village. And then there's an NPC in this building who can talk to us.
Do you hear the graveyard murmurs? Then it's almost time. Oh, I can't wait. I just can't wait.
I thought there was something about graveyard murmurs that was a little bit different in Japanese. Oh, it's more like you hear the graveyard, the song of the graveyard. So that's a little bit of an interesting difference. And that, I guess since it talks about songs, it might like be a little bit of a stronger tie to the choir. Not that I think like the choir is related to this area, but like the people that go mad, they might start to hear songs, and so maybe that's a bit more of a relevant thing to bring up, I suppose. And if you're trying to like study the lore of the choir. So I don't exactly know what's making all of this like steam come out of these pipes, or where exactly these pipes lead to and come from, or what their purposes are, other than aesthetics. And it looks like there's some oil urns right here, and so we might be able to use that to our advantage. Or not at all. The woman finally got her mallet. I was literally trying to hit the dog with every one of those swings, and I killed the two enemies that I was not aiming for at all. So we get some thick cold blood. And so the women do have voice lines as well, so they do seem to be similar to like the common Yharnamite huntsmen. However, they do not have like that kind of elongated left arm. So I'll try to show them off. So that's their right arm, obviously, and then that's their left arm. They're about the same distance apart. Or like the same length, rather, I suppose. Their faces are kind of normal, I suppose, but like they're not filled with like fur. Although like the grass makes it a little bit harder to make out right here. And they're wearing these kind of like red hooded cloaks, which I personally think they might be related to like that kind of a content NPC that a lot of people think is Father Norbert or Father Herbert. I did talk to Lance McDonald, and he said like there's no real support for saying like, whether or not that red-robed like healing church figure is Father Herbert or Father Norbert. It's just something that the fans kind of latched onto as like the most likely candidate. And when we were talking about like the summon for Henriette earlier, I did mention I did mean to mention that while some people think that she's the cleric beast in that alpha version of the game, like the living liver, which you would get like the blood echoes for the cleric beast, was described as belonging to Father Herbert or Father Norbert. So that is a little bit of a point against believing that particular theory, although I still really do quite like that theory that Henriette is the cleric beast. And I think as far as like the final build of the game goes, like that's a pretty Like, I don't think it's a terrible take to have by any means. Like, I think you could still argue it and say, well, maybe they changed their mind after that alpha version of the game. Like, there is that kind of room for that interpretation. So coming into this next area, we get a bunch of crows. This particular murder is interesting because it'll have a crow that is not hostile to the player. It seems to be more of a bug, though. And so the others will attack you, but that one that I just hit will not. So the one behind me. Oh, damn it, I just killed it. So that's probably more of a bug that the crow's AI glitches out rather than anything intended. This opens the shortcut back to that house with the graveyard murmur NPC. At the full night phase, with the 15 insight, you'll fight a mad one here that'll appear out of the ground. Some more bone marrow ash. And so, like, this area down here is really weird. Like, it doesn't seem to have the proper assets. I believe that this is supposed to be like a river, like, that leads through Hemwick and potentially into Yharnam, where it goes next to the Grand Cathedral, which I didn't show off quite yet. And part of the reason that I believe that is because there's a gigantic lake going off towards that direction, and we'll see it when we go around as well. Otherwise, it just kind of more or less resembles like the Nightmare Frontier, and like how there's like a kind of like gap beneath the land, which I don't think to be what they intended for this area. And so, coming into this next portion of the game, we've gotten a dilapidated stable here. So there's going to be some carcasses of horses, a bunch of hay, and some people waiting to come out and attack us. And part of the reason we know this is stable, other than like the horse carcasses, is it's mentioned to be such in the concept artwork book. Oh, the madness. Did I miss it? At this point, since I've already upgraded for all the twins, I didn't really need that, but didn't just want to let it be. So coming into this next room, we'll have a wheelchair huntsman ready to blast us away with his blunderbuss. And a guy who had a very bad day, sticking out of the window with some madman's knowledge. And another gemstone. As far as like the tools in this area goes, it's pretty much what you'd expect for like stables. You got like pitchforks, some very like I don't want to say like primitive, but like I can't think of the word for it, like rustic kind of furniture, and like books and gourds and glasses, all of that. I don't think there's anything like, I don't think you can make out the text on any of the papers or the books here. Use candles. So coming out into this next area, we will be able to see that lake that I was talking about. Although it almost seems more like an ocean. Although I guess that's a little bit out of the question since you can kind of see like land in the distance. So it's just a really big lake. And looking towards that direction, we can see the Forsaken Castle Cainhurst. You can see that the bridge leading towards the Hemwick Charnel Lane and like the witch's abode right there is broken in multiple places. It's dilapidated. We will be able to like go to the where the bridge will meet Hemwick itself, but it's been broken and like disrepair and doesn't quite make a straight shot to it. So that's where the bridge would have connected to Cainhurst, but it most certainly isn't like a straight line toward it. So that is the witch's abode, and that's where we will fight the boss of this area. You could even really call it a boss. And of course, just a ton of graves for no good reason. It's unfortunate. And I also don't know which just fell to its death, but I'll take it. To access it, it seems like this is supposed to have been a more residential part of Hemwick. Of course, like the architecture in this game just does not add up for like modern living by any means. So coming into this next area, we've got like a tower and a woman trying to catch us from our blind spot. And then inside here, we've got a ton of corpses of hanged men. And so it's a bit unclear whether or not like these were stored to like dry out or something like that. Whether they were waiting to be cremated, I don't know. It almost looks like these clouds over here, like clouds of bugs. So very pleasant to think about actually standing in a place like that in real life. And this will open another shortcut between areas. So that's where like the brick troll was and the woman who was throwing Molotovs at us before. I did forget to show it off. Like from Hemwick, you can see back to Yharnam and the Cathedral Ward. So like that's the orphanage over there, and that's the Astral Clock Tower of the Grand Cathedral. And that would probably be like the research hall area if it existed in the base version of the game. So Hemwick was supposed to have been like developed first, which is pretty cool that like they were able to think like that far ahead to make the geography line up. And despite it being like one of the first areas developed, it looks really good. It's just a little bit unfortunate that there's not like a ton of the lore significance to it, and that it is just an optional area. And so these patrolling dudes, we saw them very early in the game, like one of the first enemies we encountered. And I have a terrible time trying to parry them for whatever reason. So, unfortunately, the art book does call these guys executioners. That's a bit of a mistranslation, I would say. the something a bit closer to it be like a butcher instead. And so I think that's important to highlight because it shows like these guys aren't necessarily like part of the same troop that Alfred claims allegiance to. And I think that would also make their roles a bit clearer in like their placement. If you think that they're butchers or like dissectors instead of executioners, because we find them in Hemwick. We will find them in Central Yharnam and the Forbidden Woods. It doesn't really make a ton of sense for like the executioners to be there if they're related to Cainhurst. So if these guys are like out and about and trying to like collect body parts, I think that makes a lot more sense. Oh, and so that dog just reared up right there. It's gonna try to like hit us with its forepaws, but we interrupted it. So it is a bit curious as to whether or not like the dogs have been fed the blood either like intentionally or from like attacking beasts or people afflicted by beasthood, and whether or not that's had an effect on their intelligence, because certainly normal dogs would not like use their feet like that or try to use the kind of tools of that. So from this we get the lake rune, which is very fitting because we find it over this lake. And this was the bridge that I mentioned earlier that leads towards Cainhurst, and it just completely fallen apart. It looks like it was fallen apart due to age rather than like something like breaking it apart, but it could have also just happened so long ago that it's been starting to like fall apart with, or let me try to rephrase that, that if it got destroyed so long ago, just like it's kind of been left abandoned and the product of aging after that. I was looking at the lake rune. So this is a Caroll rune that transcribes inhuman sounds. The transcription of the Great One's inhuman voices ripples like a watery reflection. This rune means lake, and those who memorize it enjoy reduced physical damage. Great volumes of water serve as a bulwark guarding sleep, and an augur of the eldritch truth. Overcome this hindrance, and seek what is yours. 1 second. Alright, sorry for that pause right there. So the final part of this description is really hard for a lot of people to understand about the bulwark guarding sleep and an augur of the eldritch truth. I've mentioned it multiple times before in the previous streams, but the term that they use in Japanese for eldritch truth comes from Shinpi, and that is the exact same term that they used for the arcane stat. So the way that I interpret it that way, it would be that in order to access the arcane, one must go beyond water, which serves as a bridge between like dimensions, and that gets a bit more understandable like once you encounter Ram and go through the Moonside Lake and that sort of thing. And so there's a really important imagery to try to make this make more sense. Like in Shintoism, this idea of water has a really strong cultural importance, and so like if a pool of water is left standing, like it can become impure, and once a pool of water is stagnant, like those impurities will sink to the bottom of it. And so I think that idea gets tied into Bloodborne in that at the base of like a pool of water and like where all the impurities collect, that is going to be what's both like physically and literally closer to nightmares and dreams, like the hunter's dream. And so once you go beyond water, which kind of serves as a barrier between the worlds, you'll go into that impurity, and from that impurity you become closer to the nightmare, and that gets related to how like the Orphan of Kos is associated with the ocean and like the curse of costs. It returns to the sea, accepting of all that there is and there can be. And of course, like there's an alternative version of like the lake rune, like the sea runes. They kind of share that common part of the description. And so we'll probably talk about that a bit more later. So if you guys have any questions about that, if it was unclear, just go ahead and let me know. I think that was about it that I wanted to mention for the Japanese part of that. I'll just go ahead and read what I have, so it might sound a little bit more natural than my choppy explanation. So it says, large amounts of water are a barrier protecting sleep. Therefore, water is an augur of the arcane. Ones in search of the arcane must aim beyond water. And so, with that being said, like there are like a few things that are implied in the Japanese, and they're a little bit hard to pick up on. So I don't really blame the translators too much for not getting that. I just think it's a little bit unfortunate that they chose to use the term like Eldritch Truth instead of Arcane. One, because it's used very, very consistently in Japanese, and two, because I think saying like Eldritch Truth is a bit like loaded, in that a lot of people will just take it as a Lovecraftian reference, and they'll like want to stop looking into the lore beyond that, just because they think it'll be meant to not be understood. Whereas I would really disagree with that kind of take, and I think people end up like selling themselves short, and like the narrative of the game short as well by doing so. So we get another gemstone, which could reinforce that like whatever is going on in Hemwick, they really do seem to be like collecting things in relation to body parts and rituals, because that one's in a chest as opposed to like just a random corpse. And so now that all of the like small fry have been taken care of, I'm just gonna go ahead and examine a few of the other parts of Hemwick for us. So this is apparently like the Hemwick crossing. Once we get the invitation to Cainhurst, this is where we will come to ride the carriage towards Cainhurst. I don't exactly know how this is supposed to represent a crossing. It's probably a cultural note that I don't really know about, and I don't necessarily think that's just like a Japanese thing. Aside from that, Hemwick in this portion of the area has a ton of hanged men, just kind of chilling out on these like poles. I suppose these are what would be like a kind of sky burial, which could suggest that if the blasphemous burials of Yharnam weren't a good thing, that maybe like the hunters of hunters were related to Cainhurst or Hemwick. It seems like this area over here is more like a castle wall rather than that of a normal town. And so this might have been like the town outside the castle and could have been under Cainhurst's control at some point before it lost its authority and was usurped by the Healing Church. It seems like the sun is over there. I don't know if that really lines up with what we see in Central Yharnam. I should probably look into that more in my own free time. I'd almost guess not. Actually, it might work because like if you look past the Grand Cathedral, just that way, I would almost expect it to still be like towards there, like over by the witch's abode. Like it seems like we've passed where the sun was, so that doesn't really make a lot of sense now that I look at it. And so I think the upside down figures of the hanged men could resemble like what we find on the little tombstones in the Hunter's Dream, and I'll try to show that off once we go back and defeat the Witch of Hemwick. And so some of them are upside down, and I think that does get tied into that idea of like the fluid imagery and water and impurities and all that. And of course, just to be clear, like a lot of that is my take. You don't have to take that as like exactly what the game says. That's more of my interpretation rather than anything explicit. looks like I missed the Wandering Madness. I thought I heard it. Probably easier to get once we kill the witch. So coming into the witch's abode, we see a lot more of the corpses that are like strapped and tied down together. A few of them are actually tied to the beds, so I do wonder if these were supposed to be patients at some point. Maybe this could have been like a precursor to the kinds of experiments that we would find in like the research hall of the DLC. We don't really know. It's just a gigantic stack of corpses, because I mean, why not? So coming into this next room, we will fight the Witch of Hemwick, and there's a bit of a note to make about the Japanese. Rather than saying like the Witch of Hemwick, it's more ambiguous whether it's just one witch or multiple witches, because as I've mentioned before, like singular and plural is not very often denoted in Japanese. So when you fight the first incarnation of the witch, it seems like, oh, maybe there's only one witch. But then when you find the other ones, oh, I guess it like wasn't necessarily explicitly one witch. With that being said, though, when I did look at the PlayStation website's supplementary material in both English and Japanese, it confirmed that it's only one Witch of Hemwick. So all of that kind of like linguistic sleuthing was for naught, unfortunately. Still fun to look at, though. So contrary to how it may seem at first, that thing which popped out of the ground is not the Witch of Hemwick. This kind of eye collector covered with eyes is the witch. And you can kind of cheese it really effectively by just not following up with the visceral. Oh. I just thought it was gonna like disappear at this point. Oh, I was trying to visceral, but that did not work. So these mad ones, if you do not have any insight, will actually not spawn at all. And so this might be bad. Okay. The witches themselves have like that kind of a paralytic arcane attack, which is shared in common with like the bloodsuckers and Queen Yharnam when her baby cries. So there's like 3 witches, essentially. That's not good. That's not good. Okay, I'm dead. So for me talking all that crap, I ended up dying, which is pretty sad and funny. But it's not a big deal. So apparently that is supposed to just be one woman. It doesn't make a ton of sense, but I guess you just have to take that at face value of like dealing with insight-based shenanigans. Actually, yeah, since I died, why not just kind of show that off? Because it's something like I really never do, because the witches are pretty lackluster, but I've already shown off like all of the 60 points of insight and what they can show in the last lore through, so I'm fine with having like a lower insight count for this one. So we'll just go ahead and buy Jura stuff and Gascoigne stuff and maybe a few of the consumables. I suppose I could look at those bells later. And now that I've lost so much insight, you can see that my beasthood meter was going up as well, or like it was increasing. So I don't know how to describe it. So there is like a kind of relationship between having insight and a beasthood and a frenzy meter. And so the more insight you have, the less beasthood you will have, and the more susceptible to the frenzy stat you will become. So this is the shortcut that we opened from earlier. And then this is the second shortcut. Not gonna deal with that butcher. Right, so this time there will be no spawning guys. The first time you encounter the witch, the guys will always show up because you do get that ambient point of insight. So this really does make the fight a heck of a lot easier. Now that that's done, I'm gonna actually just go ahead and examine the witch up close, because that's something I'm typically able to do. As you can see, they're completely covered with eyes, although it's a little bit hard to make out that they're eyes. Since these are like based on the eye collector enemy, that's kind of where that comes from. And it just shows that there's, I guess, like a really big connection between like eyes and the arcane, because these versions of the eye collectors do have those kind of like arcane attacks that you don't normally get on the regular eye collectors. And so with no mad ones wandering around, it's really easy to just kind of maneuver. But not necessarily easier to find the dumb witch. So that was the kind of arcane attack that she just did, which I cheesed, fortunately. And so she does have like a little bit of a tell. You can kind of see like a waving light kind of thing at times to find her. I was wondering like if doing it this way there would only be one version of the witch as opposed to multiple, but apparently there's still multiple ones with the extra insight. So she must have been closer to me. Okay, there she is. I'll shamelessly say that I've stolen this strat from Lance McDonald, where he kind of inadvertently discovered it. on one of his streams. So that concludes that fight. Looks like there's some spawning bad ones after the fact, I guess. And then we only get some like bloodshot eyeballs from the boss. So she doesn't really give a lot that's important, but immediately after the fight and like coming into this next room, that's where we really get the reward for coming through this area. So coming up to like this kind of like cell type room, we see a corpse just like strapped into a chair, and it's that of a hunter. When we get closer to it, we get the Rune workshop tool. And so you can see clearly that like its arms are bound to the chair. So in earlier points of development, you were able to access the Nightmare Frontier, or maybe is the Nightmare of Mensis, by coming back to Hemwick Charnel Lane, and this was the original starting area. And so maybe this corpse was supposed to function similarly to the way that Mikolash's corpse works in like the Advent Plaza in Yahar'gul. We don't really know for sure, but I think that's a pretty good educated guess, all things considered. So let's go ahead and look at that workshop tool. So Runesmith Caroll, student of Bergenworth, transcribed the inhuman utterings of the Great Ones into what are now called Caroll runes. The hunter who retrieves this workshop tool can etch Caroll runes into the mind to attain their wondrous strength. Provost Willem would have been proud of Caroll runes, as they do not rely upon blood in any measure. So there are quite a few differences that I think are noteworthy. First of all would be that thing that I've been talking about quite a bit this stream in relation to like the arcane and eldritch truth. Instead of saying you attain the Caroll runes wondrous strength, it's their arcane strength again, like Shinpi. So that phrase or like that term gets reused here, and I think that's really important to try to understand like how the cosmic forces of Bloodborne are like kind of interconnected. They seem much more distantly related in English, and a lot harder to pick up on that the Caroll Rune Workshop tool and the Caroll Runes in general are related to the arcane specifically, as opposed to just like multiple kinds of magic in the Bloodborne universe. So I think it's all supposed to be like one thing, but it's a little bit hard to pick up on. The other part would be at the very end where it says Provost Willem would have been proud of Caroll runes, as they do not rely upon blood in any measure. In English, that makes it sound as though Willem would have had no knowledge of Caroll at any point, and that Caroll must have come later. The Japanese description is more along the lines of the hunter who recovered this workshop tool is able to burn Caroll runes into the mind and gain their arcane power. Not relying upon blood is something that is close to Headmaster Willem's ideals. So the Japanese makes it a bit more ambiguous as to whether or not Willem was knowledgeable of Caroll's existence and his or her like work on the runes. I think since we can gain the eye rune from Willem, there's probably a very good chance that he was aware of Caroll runes and their functions. But I don't remember if I looked at the Korean of this to see if it matched the English or not. So there might have been the potential that this description was revised at some point. But I think that's about it for this. The other thing I suppose I could mention would be that it talks about like the Great One's inhuman mutterings. And I don't necessarily believe this myself, so take it with a heavy grain of salt. It might imply that like inhuman things in general are probably closer to Great Ones, and for what it's worth, like they say that the Thumerians are inhuman at times. So if you want to ascribe to that theory, it is possible to read that some of the Thumerians might have been Great Ones, maybe like Yharnam, or maybe like some of the higher powered ones like the Elders, but it's something that I would just say like is tenuous, but can't necessarily be disproven. But it's very interesting to think about. So now that all that's been looted, coming into the kind of cathedral which we're in, or the chapel, we've got this imagery of a kind of a woman over this figure of a man on a chair. This is pretty much shoplifted from, or not, maybe not shoplifted, but like facelifted rather, from Michelangelo's Pieta, a statue in real life that you can look up on like Google Images really easily. I'll go ahead and like type the name of it into chat. It's Pieta, Pieta, and so this shows like in the real world a version of this that it's like a Mary like weeping over the corpse of Jesus. So I think the sorry, I think I'm getting an Amber Alert right now. Yep. Sorry about that. What's it saying? Pieta. So yeah, Mary is like weeping over the corpse of Jesus, looking towards heaven. So I think this is supposed to represent that like the body of Lawrence takes on that like messianic figure, and this gets pretty thoroughly in the DLC area where we see like the beast version of Lawrence in this exact same like position in their version of the Grand Cathedral. And then there's a kind of just like nun-like figures on the sides of it, and I don't think they're terribly important. We've got like some kind of praying figures on the sides of the walls. Of course, tons of the hanged men that are ubiquitous in Hemwick. We've got some more of like the infirmary-esque beds with corpses strapped into them, and like the walls themselves are just shelves containing corpses. So very macabre and very dark imagery to go with that like Bloodborne aesthetic. So that pretty much concludes Hemwick Charnel Lane, and so we've actually got a bit of time left, so we're going to go back to the Grand Cathedral and deal with Amelia, and hopefully head to the Forbidden Woods. Although, maybe before we go to Amelia, we should check to see if Gilbert or the imposter have any different dialogue. I know the imposter won't, so that's kind of a silly statement, so maybe Gilbert will. I don't think he does, though.
Well, what? Over time, it very well. Farewell, good.
Garriman is still gone, and even though we just defeated the witches, like the in-game time does kind of progress a little bit, even though like the what do you call it, the environment doesn't show it. Like the sun doesn't progress any further in its like zenith, or its travels, its position rather. So this says memorize a Caroll rune to acquire its Eldritch strength. So this kind of I would say is a bit reinforcing of what I was mentioning earlier, with this idea reused for Caroll runes, and that ties to the arcane stat. And the description for the Caroll Rune Workshop tool says Wonder Strength instead. So that just shows like the term for Shinpi was translated very inconsistently in the English text. So I'm going to go and try to remember to talk to Ariana and use her blood vial again to make Adella a bit more jealous. I believe it's after using 3 of her blood vials once Adella and Ariana are both together, that she will then become jealous and kill Ariana right after. So, we can't see Adella right now, but maybe she'll pop up after we talk to Ariana.
Oh, hello. The whole town's turned, has it? Quite a big family now, aren't we? Though I'm afraid I seem to be the black sheep. Back for my blood, I presume. Oh, good. Come close, dear. I'm always happy to help.
So that shows that Ariana is pretty cognizant of her position as a bit of a social pariah. Maybe the Chapel Dweller will talk a bit differently about the NPCs right now. I'm a little bit skeptical, but maybe it'll work out.
If you please, kind, when the night of the hunt passes, suppose we could be friends? Maybe? Now, I know I hardly deserve it, but, well, I had to just ask, you know. Out of line. Yes, perhaps so. But, well, give it a thought. If you wouldn't mind, of course.
So that does sum up a lot of the Chapel Dweller's personality right there. He's very bashful and humble and doesn't feel worthy of friendship or companionship, and he hints towards that as well. Like earlier on, if you do talk to him after sending Ariana to him, he'll say like she even talks to me even though it's not much, whereas like it seems like all of the other NPCs ignore or disdain him. So it does seem to be ingrained, but also reinforced through the others' treatment of him in general.
Once the night of the hunt passes, suppose we could be friends? Give it a thought. Well, if you wouldn't mind.
So just to rub it in Adella's face, let's go ahead and just take that blood vial right in front of her.
Oh, brave hunter. Thank the gods you're safe. Do you wish to be treated with blood? Or am I unworthy of your attention? Forgive me, I should have known better. What would a brave hunter do with lowly blood like mine? Please, forget I even asked.
And so that just completely seals the deal in terms of like showing that Adella must be jealous of Ariana, and that the
Oh, brave hunter, I pray for your safety.
that the narrow-minded man really gets things backwards. Because if she thinks that her blood is lowly, and we continue to take the whore's blood, it just really feeds into her inferiority complex and what sets her off for the night.
You! Stay away from me! I know all your tricks.
Little old lady is still very angry at us.
Give it a rest, please. I've no time for your petty lies. And what? Just go away now. I can't stand the stench of your lying.
And so we can take a hint and just leave that for now. I believe at this point in the game the NPCs and the buildings say the same stuff, but once we defeat Amelia and progress a bit more, they will begin to like lose their sanity as the night continues. maybe patches can come out now. I don't fully remember. Oh, I'm gonna die. Wait, no, I have less insight, so maybe I'll live. So yeah, you see the insight meter does not go up nearly as fast as it did before when I had like over 15 insight. Just to shows that like the frenzy resistance really does get reduced when you have more and more insight. So coming into this next area, we will find a couple of hunters. One, I think they might both be wearing the Yharnamite set. I don't remember off the top of my head. One will be wielding the Tonitrus, which you can kind of see sparking over there. And the other will be using the rifle spear. Extremely annoying to deal with. And I heard the Wandering Madness. Oh, and this guy has like the wooden plank, the wooden shield. I don't remember if I picked that up actually. Okay, just go ahead and miss that point blank. So the Tonitrus Hunter drops us some bolt paper, which works pretty well together, I guess. Applying bolt paper to your bolt-based weapon. And so this damned rifle spear wielding hunter has unlimited bullets, because why not? Defeating him just gives us a bunch of Quicksilver bullets, because that makes a ton of sense, because he had so damned many of them. And the NPCs here just have this little kind of prayer.
Bless us with blood. Bless us with blood. Bless us with blood.
Bless us with blood. Bless us with blood. Bless us with blood. Bless us with blood.
So the Japanese for that is more like the blessing of blood, or like the blood's blessing. Damn it. Oh, I don't have my HUD on. I was like, why can't I lock on? Thought I missed it. And it is pretty good that they use like bless us with blood, because it's a little bit ambiguous as to whether or not like they are actually actively taking the blood in the Japanese script. Damn it. So like bless us with blood is a pretty good localization for that. Like whether or not they are actively taking the blood or asking for blood, that's the ambiguous thing, I think. that was actually a good thing, so...
Oh, hello. The whole town's turned, has it? Quite a big family now, aren't we? Though I'm afraid I seem to be the black sheep. Back for my blood, I presume. Oh, good. Come close, dear. I'm always happy to help.
Ah, brave hunter. What is it? Have you renewed thoughts on this matter? Forgive me. I must cease this nonsense. Forget I ever offered.
And so I think,
Brave hunter, I pray for your safety.
the next time, Adella will go out and try to kill Ariana. It might be 2 more, but I'm pretty sure it was 3. So this time, without the hunters there to ambush us, I'm gonna go pick up some of this frenzied cold blood, and hopefully not die to the snatcher again. So it's got my echoes. Its eyes are glowing. Yeah, I already got the madness, so coming up this way we can see where that abandoned workshop aligns with the like the Cathedral Ward. Like that's the grand tree, and the workshop itself should be like right there. Might be a little bit hard to make out in the mist, I suppose, but it is there. Those are like the trees leading up to the area. Okay, so that's it right there, I think. Part of the reason of coming up through here is there will be like these kind of snipers on this like little cliff face over here. You can't attack them from down there, so it's pretty important to come this way to get rid of them. And then down there in the distance there will be 2 butchers and I think 2 wandering madnesses. 2 or 3. I'm not trying to deal with 2 at once because I'm really bad at like, pairing these guys generally anyway. I finally seem to be doing like a decent amount of damage. I'm not going to worry about the madnesses right now, just because this guy's a pain in the butt. Oh, that's pathetic. I was originally trying to rally off of it, but that failed spectacularly. So, one way to make the madnesses appear again is to exit the game and reload. It's a little bit cheap, but so is dealing with all of the enemies just to get some upgrade materials that we, quite frankly, don't really need at this point in the game. But if we were like using multiple weapons or trying different ones, it certainly wouldn't be a bad thing to have. So Devin, are you still around? Are you going to be doing like another playthrough of Bloodborne anytime soon? So coming up to this next corpse, we get the, what was it called? The lead elixir, and this is a pretty interesting item as far as its description goes. It says it's a heavy, syrupy liquid medicine, temporarily shifts weight to make deflection of attacks easier, but must be used with care, as it also slows movement with no change to defense. Its recipe for this mysterious concoction is unknown, but some postulate that it materializes only when the most desperate nightmares. This is what I would say would be a true mistranslation of the Japanese text. The Japanese is very clear that it should be like nightmarish despair. So it forms out of nightmarish despair, not from nightmares. And I know I'm beating a bit of a dead horse here, but just like nightmarish is like Akamu Teki, and so like the Teki really makes it clear that that's supposed to have been an adjective. So this item, a lot of people in the lore community would take as evidence to believe that the current version of Yharnam that we're in right now, like the waking world, is essentially part of a nightmare, since you can find this lead elixir right here, but that's just not what the Japanese for that says. And this right here is going to be the entrance for Yara Ghul, and one of the ways that we can access the lecture hall later on. I don't believe coming into contact with this amygdala will give us a point of insight, and you can't see it right now, but if it picks us up with its hand, you can kind of see an outline for it. So we're going to look at the insight meter to see, oh, we can see it. Oh, I forgot that it drops us, so that was really dumb of me. So yeah, no insight from that, but maybe at least now we can see if Adella has killed Ariana. Indeed, she is slumped over in her chair, a pool of blood around her, and her item for the taking, Ariana's shoes. Ariana's shoes. Shoes worn by Ariana, Woman of the Night in the Cathedral Ward. Innocent and cute in contrast with its owner. The Japanese for that was very slightly different. It's the shoes of Ariana, the harlot of the church town, which just means like Cathedral Ward, and it's adorable and quite an ill-matched item. And so I think the English is a bit better in that. I almost feel like saying adorable was probably a better choice than innocent, but I don't know, maybe it works. Or yeah, so yeah, there's really not too much to say about that. So Ariana has been killed by Adella in her blood-fueled jealousy. We can even see that she's been caught red-handed.
Ah, brave hunter. What is it? Have you renewed thoughts on this matter? Forgive me. Ah, have you? Yes, of course. Coming close. Now. Take my blood.
So there's nothing really different about her dialogue. I guess she laughs at the end of that, which is a bit different. So coming back to this guy right here, he should have something interesting for us to listen to.
Oh, kind hunter. The lady you sent over, she's dead. Killed, stone dead. Why? Must have been a beast, right? Or do you think someone out there could have... I just don't... Oh... Well... I do know. It's my fault. Oh my...
So yeah, that really just does show that the chapel dweller does take it upon himself to like try and save everyone that he could, and he wasn't able to see that Ariana was killed by Adella because he's blind. Like if you look at his eyes, they're like completely glazed over, potentially as a result of the blood, or maybe through his worship of Erden.
Was it a beast? Or could someone from outside have come in and... I just don't know.
So his dialogue will stay the same no matter their cause of death. So whether or not like the Adella killing Ariana occurs, or whether or not the suspicious beggar kills one of the NPCs, like it'll be the same. So that's why he kind of talks about the beast, but there is no beast in this instance.
Was it a beast? Oh.
So I'm just gonna try to listen to the last portion of Adella's dialogue. I don't think these two will say anything different, but...
You! Stay away from me! I know all your tricks.
It's interesting that she is worried about us coming close as opposed to Adella right now.
Give it. I've no time for your petty. What? Just I can't stand.
And then this dude doesn't give a damn.
Oh. Oh, brave hunter. I pray for your safety. Come back soon.
So that little laughter there, I think, does show that she's a bit more on edge and not quite normal, and that's something that gets shared with a few different characters throughout the night of the hunt. So we're just going to go back and get our blood echoes, and then just run up to Amelia. And I think later on, I don't know if it's like after the blood moon, Adella will attack the player. But maybe we'll see that happen after Amelia. was gonna get hit for sure right there. So I am a bit surprised that you were able to make out the amygdala so clearly. Like, there are quite a bit of differences from that one and the one over by the Erden Chapel, because that one will give you a point of insight once you get frenzied by it, and this one does not, and that one is invisible, whereas this one isn't, or is, whichever makes more sense in that context. I think that's something we should look at if we do a 1.0 playthrough, just to see whether or not that the one over by Erden Chapel gives frenzy, or like gives insight in the base version of the game. I heard it run away. I keep forgetting it's over there. It's not too important. So we're going back to the Grand Cathedral, and I'll look at all the statues and things on the front of the building as we get closer, and deal with this servant over here. Alright, so we got some of the normal lantern statues here with the skeletons crawling up above it. We find those in the chalices, as I said time and time again. As we come to the door of the Grand Cathedral, we see that it itself is lined by these kind of figures of amygdalae. So, while it's certainly true that the School of Mensis must revere them to some extent, that also seems to be true of the normal main branch of the Healing Church. On the door itself, it looks like we've got these kind of I'll just go ahead and say I think that these things are supposed to resemble like the third umbilical cords. It's a little bit hard to make that out from like this angle. I think it'll be a bit clearer in the Upper Cathedral Ward, where you get a larger version of those statues, and they also do get repeated in the Research Hall as well. I can't make out if there's anything at the very top of the door. It just looks like a floral type of imagery. So that's about it for the very front of the cathedral. So we can come inside, and so this kind of like mandala type image is used a lot with the Healing Church, and really just like a lot in the FromSoft games. Like this just kind of looks like the Ring of Chloranthy. I think that's like similar to the Imperial Seal of Japan. So I don't know if that's supposed to have a specific meaning. I guess I should have looked into that, but I don't really think it's that important, all things considered. So this note right here is extremely easy to miss. I completely missed it my first playthrough, and I think even my second. Like, I think I only found it because I was looking at like the actual data of the game and found out like, oh, I never found this note. Where the hell was it? So, heir to the ritual of blood, purveyor of ministration. Place your hand on the altar's sacred covering and inscribe Master Lawrence's adage upon your flesh. I think there was a small difference in Japanese. So, the one who has inherited the secret ritual of blood, principal one of the alms of blood, touch the holy covering of the altar, Master Lawrence's adage will be carved into you. So yeah, there's a little bit of a flavor difference, but the overall message is the same. That's telling us in order to gain access to the adage of Bergenworth and the Healing Church, we must go and place our hand on the skull covering of the Healing Church altar. And Sundry Saturn says they've never seen that note. So yeah, very easy to miss, because I mean it's just by all these candles, and the glow is very indistinct, especially if your camera angle is like kind of looking up. Like you're really not gonna pay attention to that. So maybe like on the way back, but it really just does not stand out very well at all. So Ascending the steps, we see that there's a bunch of like blood splattered all over the place. What caused this, I have no idea. I mentioned this in the last playthrough, but I thought like this only appeared like once Eileen came in here, but it's certainly not the case. So was there a struggle of control in here at some point? I really don't know, and it's something I'm curious about. Ahead we do have Vicar Amelia, the head of the healing church, in the midst of prayer. So we're going to turn up the volume to listen to some of that.
Remain wary of the frailty of men. Their wills are weak, minds young. Were it not for fear, death would go unlamented. Seek the old blood. Let us pray, let us wish to partake in communion. Let us partake in communion and feast upon the old blood. Our thirst for blood satiates us, soothes our fears. Seek the old blood. But beware the frailty of men. Their wills are weak, minds young. The foul beasts will dangle nectar and lure the meek into the depths. Remain wary of the frailty of men. Their wills are weak, minds young. Were it not for fear, death would go unlamented.
So that final line about like were it not for fear, death would go unlamented is really different in the Japanese. It's closer to like if you lose fear, no one will mourn you. So it's more like your death wouldn't be lamented. I think that's what they were really trying to go with that in the Japanese. Aside from that, there is a little bit of a note worth mentioning as far as like linguistics goes. The line where she says, what is it? Let us partake in communion and wait, which is it? Let me.
Remain wary of the frailty of men. Their wills are weak.
Okay, so it says, seek the old blood, let us pray, let us wish. The Japanese for that could be a bit ambiguous. This could be extremely archaic, well maybe not extremely, but very archaic language, more literary language, where instead of like saying being granted blood, or like the being granted its blessing, it could be saying you will not be granted its the blessing of blood by only praying for it, so you must like partake in it. So that is a little bit of a difference from like the more modern Japanese ending that they're using for like atairu. So the Japanese for it is atairaren, and that could be either you shall be granted its blessing or you cannot be granted its blessing, is essentially what I've been trying to say. And so I think both readings do have an interesting like spin on the interpretation of this. If you believe that she's saying like let us pray, let us wish to take in communion and being able to be granted communion from praying and wishing for it, I'm not entirely sure that really has like a whole lot of relevance. But if you believe like the more modern version of that grammar pattern, it's more like praying and wishing will not grant you the blessing of blood, and so you must like go out and seek it and partake of it. So that being said, I do think the archaic version might be the more correct reading of it, because it's probably closer to like biblical Japanese, intentionally so. But the ultimate takeaway that I'd like to talk about with her prayer there is like the idea of beasts dangling nectar to lure the meek into the depths is relevant when we look at that opening cutscene in the game where that beast that rises out of the pool of the blood comes up to the player and like extends its claw towards us. I think that's what that imagery is supposed to bring to mind. And the idea of fear being necessary to deal with the old blood just is not true, because we do see with the beast patients in Old Yharnam, they still hold on to fear. Eileen tells us without fear we'd be a little different from the beasts themselves. So it shows, like, from a very fundamental level, the healing church seems to have a flawed understanding of the blood and what it brings about. And So this idea of like the divine being corrupt and perverted, I think might also be tied into like the design of Vicar Amelia as a boss when we see her transformation in a second.
But beware.
So we see that Vicar Amelia has transformed into a gigantic kind of cleric beast. Obviously it's not the same type of cleric beast that we saw from the enemy that is named cleric beast. She has a more like canine face, and her antlers or horns are a different nature. They seem to be more along the lines of like a deer, whereas like the cleric beast is kind of like a moose almost, or something like that. I think one thing that her features are supposed to evoke might be that of like a Kirin, like a kind of like a cross between like a Japanese dragon and a, I might die from that, and a giraffe looking like thing. They are representative of a very divine mystic being. If you've ever seen like Princess Mononoke, it's kind of similar to that, maybe, just not like more like a moose. So I think there's like that kind of a combination between a very sacred kind of beast, or beast might not be the right word, like a very sacred animal, divine animal, being corrupted or perverted by like blood. Vicar Amelia takes on that trope of being like a heavenly maiden, but that doesn't really pan out, because we do see that she transforms into this kind of grotesque beast. And so I think that's supposed to show that like the religion of the Healing Church is misguided, because she's still clutching onto her golden pendant, a symbol of the Healing Church's teachings and like what it professes, but that was not able to save her from this kind of grisly fate. And so with that being said about like her general enemy design, it is a bit curious as to whether or not she has a really active role in the Healing Church, and in whether or not she has more supervisory powers over like the School of Mensis and the choir, if she was aware of those kind of experiments, or if those are being taken place even beyond the knowledge of like the so-called leader of the Healing Church. The highest authority in a parish, or like one church. So I do believe it should be read that Vicar Amelia was like the actual head of the Healing Church. And the note that we looked at right beforehand should like reinforce that as well. I did forget to equip numbing mists, so hopefully I won't need them. But to also talk about like Amelia, in some of the earlier versions of the game, she had more like a black cloth on her back instead of this white one, so I do believe that's another way to reinforce that she's supposed to represent that kind of a heavenly maiden motif. So that's her restoring her limbs. And I didn't show it off this time because I showed it off in like the last lore through, but if you don't like break her limbs or deal a lot of damage to her, she will like clasp her hands together with the golden pendant between her hands and pray for a little bit and restore like a lot of her HP. So this boss is kind of a bit more of a DPS check compared to some of the other bosses. So Sundry asks, could I repeat the name of the Japanese creature she resembles? I think it's like a bastardization of a Kirin. It's the same as the beer name, if you're familiar with that. I've typed it into chat. Kirin. So very often they are like conflated with giraffes. And it is believed like maybe the initial inspiration for a Kirin was just like hearing the stories or seeing the images of giraffes from like other countries. So you're welcome. So after defeating Amelia, we do gain that gold pendant that she was holding on to throughout the fight. So this is the gold pendant of Vicar Amelia, used to change into a blood gem which fortifies weapons. This pendant, passed down among vicars who head the healing church, is a reminder of the cautionary adage, words that will open the gates of Bergenworth. And so technically we still don't know what that adage is quite yet, but this should be confirmation that Vicar Amelia is the head of the healing church and has succeeded like the position of Lawrence. And whether or not she's like the subsequent vicar following Lawrence is a bit unclear, although I think this idea that since it was this golden pendant was passed down for generations would suggest that there's probably a bit of a few steps between her and Lawrence. So we can also use this item to gain another blood gem, the gold blood gem, and I did forget to use the doll's tear stone to get a different kind of blood gem as well. The tier blood gem. So let's go ahead and look at both of those since they're both unique. So this is a blood gem that fortifies weapons and adds various properties. Most radio blood gems have effects that bear upon physical attacks, and this golden radio blood gem, kept for generations within the church, strengthens attacks against those afflicted intensely by beasthood. When clerics began transforming into unspeakable beasts, the church needed something to retaliate with. So this does kind of reinforce like what was talked about with like the items related to Ludwig, that clerics transformed into much larger beasts. That's probably why the hunters following in the path of Ludwig had to adopt a different style of beast hunting, because it seemed like they were becoming larger or more intense and more savage and harder to deal with, or perhaps more abominations and non-bestial enemies were things that they would begin to face compared to the times of Gehrman. The Japanese for this is also very similar. It's more like clergymen become the most fearsome beast. It's because of that the church needed to prepare. Very similar semantically. And so I do like the idea that they would use like different kinds of metals against beasts, and that would increase their effectiveness. It seems like the more silver type weapons within the game are more associated with righteous damage. I never really looked into how well like righteousness versus serrated damage works out against specific enemies. It's probably something I should look into, but I think it's a little bit sloppy in terms of like the presentation of the game. There might be some good lore reasons there, but I think generally it's just a little bit of a hidden mechanic, really. And so like righteousness is a different type of damage than like blunt type damage and serrated damage. Like the threaded cane's base form deals righteous damage, and its tricked form does serrated damage, and serrated is supposedly more effective against beasts. And so this is the tier blood gem. It's a blood gem that fortifies weapons and adds various properties. Drop of blood gems are special gems that adapt to various weapons and shapes. Created from a shining silver doll tier, this gem is a quiet but unfaltering friend that continually restores HP, the life essence of a hunter. Perhaps the doll's creator had wished for such a friend, albeit in vain. So I did talk about that a little bit, I think. Oh, maybe I misread. Oh, I think I was looking at the tier blood gem instead of the tier stone when I looked at the initial description. Oh no, no. Okay, yeah, I think that's what I did. So, just going back to the tiered stone, the final paragraph says, "A doll sheds neither blood nor tears, and thus its nature remains unknown. Whoever thinks this is precious must be troubled by severe naivete. The Japanese for that is truly a doll should have neither blood nor tears, therefore its nature is unknowable." So it's more or less talking about that tear stone. So that was a little bit of my fault in that previous stream. So please overlook that kind of mistake, and hopefully I don't make too many more in the future. So I guess I did say like for the tier stone, like the final paragraph had a lot of differences. That's because I was literally looking at the wrong item. So it looks like this is pretty similar to the tier blood gem in English. So right now with that done, and Vicar Amelia and her boss fight completed, we're going to go ahead and examine the skull at the base of the Grand Cathedral, and then I'll go ahead and break down the imagery of this like area that we've got presented to us. So some people also think like the crack in this skull resembles the crack in the skull of the bloodletting beast, and in earlier builds of the game, like the bloodletting beast might have been Lawrence. The internal file names for the bloodletting beast is like the founder beast, or the host of beast blood, as opposed to bloodletting beast. The host of beast blood is its current Japanese name, and the founder beast is what it was kind of called in the alpha version of the game in the living liver description. So there was probably a really good chance that like the role of Lawrence was connected to that beast at some point in development, but it kind of got rolled back and a little bit retconned and probably repurposed to that like the ape in Sekiro. So let's go ahead and play this cutscene.
Master Willem, I've come to bid you farewell.
Oh, I know. You think now to betray me.
No, but you will never listen. I tell you, I will not forget our adage.
We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open.
Fear the old blood. I must take my leave.
By the gods, fear it, Lawrence.
So there's quite a bit I want to say about that cutscene in general. The first and probably like the most important bit of it is when Lawrence greets or bids Master Willem farewell. Willem says, "You think now to betray me," in English, and the Japanese text for that is "Kimi mo uragiru no daro," which is like "You will also betray me now." Like it's kind of like a really implied that like Willem's expecting Lawrence to betray him, but the important bit is the particle following kimi, which means you. Kimi mo means you also, so that really means that somebody else betrayed Willem before Lawrence. Obviously, the most likely culprit would be Gehrman. This is more or less confirmed in the cut content of the game, where Willem bluntly states that Gehrman betrayed him before Lawrence was going to. Even before I read that cut content, I thought that was the most likely conclusion, just because uh, it is Gehrman and Lawrence who kind of work together to either like found the healing church or encounter the moon presence and all of that kind of thing. But I think there's also a good chance that Gehrman was supposed to be that scholar who went to Cainhurst and brought them that forbidden blood, or at least that's the narrative that the healing church went with. It would make sense for Gehrman to be affiliated with Cainhurst because his style of fighting seemed to resemble that of the Cainhurst style of fighting a bit more closely. He used quickening, which is more associated with the Cainhurst nobles and the Thumerians and Maria. The very first hunters were also able to use quickening, so like that connection between quickening and Gehrman and Cainhurst and Thumer all together just kind of supports each other. What else was there? The idea of the doll originally being based on Annalise also makes a lot of sense because we find that hair ornament in the abandoned old workshop, and so if Gehrman had ties to Annalise as well as the hunters of Cainhurst, it really just kind of all falls into place, in my opinion. So, with that out of the way, Lawrence says they'll never forget the adage. Willem says we were born into the blood, made men by blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open. That is a bit different from the Japanese. It's close to through blood we are born, become man, and lose our humanity, you fool. And I originally in my spreadsheets had an older version of that text apparently, and it was so this kind of a phrase was altered at some point. So the earlier version of the text was closer to like we become man through blood, transcend man, and lose humanity. And I think that's a pretty interesting like a revelation there. So like the blood allows them to become people, which I don't think is like too important, but it also allows them to transcend their humanity. So like it brings them on the path of becoming a great one, and by becoming a great one, they lose their humanity. And I think that's kind of what Willem is trying to get at least with the very earliest version of that text, and even so the kind of a updated one as well. So, in order to transcend man, do you need to leave your humanity behind? I think that's a very interesting question that the game of Bloodborne poses to us, and I believe that that kind of gets reinforced when we come into contact with characters like the suspicious beggar, who will condemn the hunter for having blood on their hands when we encounter him in the Forbidden Woods and attack him, because it's a bit shocking because he's a beast and he's attacking us, and he's calling us the true murderers. The hunters are the ones with the blood on their hands, and so is the suspicious beggar right in his actions? Is he a greater being, and does that give him like the license to go and kill humans? Like, does the law of the jungle really apply that strongly? Like, the strong eats the weak. If the suspicious beggar is stronger, can he continue to consume the weaker? Those are the kind of like philosophical questions that I think Bloodborne presents at a subtextual level, which really fascinate me quite a bit. And so the last thing I want to talk about with the cutscene is when they both say like, "Fear the old blood." The Japanese for that is it can mean like fear the old blood. Kanete chi is what they use, but kaneru is a word that can also mean like you should like already fear the blood. It could be another way to interpret that. And I wondered whether or not like they were using an older text when they came up with the English, but no, it seems like this is something that was used very early on in the Japanese line, so they probably got like some developer notes that they wanted it to be old blood as opposed to like you should already be afraid of the blood. And Kaneru is a little bit hard to translate directly. It does mean old, but there's also like a sense of familiarity that goes along with that. So like you should already be like aware of what this blood is, and you should probably already fear it. I think is, and the other way would be like it's blood that's old, but it doesn't really use the common term for old, so it's a bit mystifying, really. And so with that thing about like fearing the old blood, one of the reasons why I was interested in like the dynamics of that line is because when you do fight Gehrman at the very end of the game, rather than saying like fear the old blood, he'll say like fear the blood to be like a kind of a difference with how like that message was treated throughout time. And so I think like with Gehrman it might have just been like fear the blood. With Lawrence it could have been like already fear the blood or fear the old blood, and with Amelia it's more like if you lose your fear no one will mourn you. So I think like there's supposed to be a like an implied period of time where like the original message of like the church's forebears has been lost or diluted, and so like the healing church is kind of bastardized their own origins to an extent. So that's a lot of talking there for just dealing with that like little cutscene. And so now I just want to turn our attention back to the kind of statues and imagery shown before us right now. So just going to back up for a little bit. When we look at the top of the altar, we've got a headless woman with some wings that are a little bit hard to make out, and she's pouring an urn down towards a chair. I have not mentioned it in this playthrough quite yet, but originally, instead of using the lanterns as the mechanic to return to the Hunter's Dream, it was a kind of a warp chair, which would have like an apparition of a sleeping figure in it. You would wave it away, and from this chair, like the player would sit down and go to sleep to access the Hunter's Dream. So I think what that's supposed to represent is like this basin filled with liquid is supposed to be the blood coming from like a metaphorical heaven down towards this chair, which represents both sleep and death, and like the Hunter's Dream essentially. And so beneath that chair we've got like this Ark of the Covenant looking like thing. It's a coffin. It seems as though there's messengers on the side of it. I mentioned this earlier, but one of the alternate ways to read messenger in Japanese, shisha, is the deceased person. So this idea of the blood being able to allow one to literally ascend themselves beyond death, beyond sleep, into greatness, I think is what's coming along at the imagery of this altar in general. And beneath all of that, we've got the skull of the bestial Lawrence, who failed to kind of live up to that grand dream of evolution beyond man. So that's it for the Grand Cathedral. We're going to go back to the Hunter's Dream and level up, and I think it should already be the night cycle. And so after we do that, we'll see whether or not Adella will attack us, and then we'll go on and head to the Forbidden Woods and talk to Patches and Gilbert and some of the NPCs. So the doll's sleeping.
Welcome home, good hunter. I must have drifted off. What is it you desire? Very well, let me... Hunters have told me about the church, about the gods and their love. But do the gods love their creations? I am a doll created by you humans. Would you ever think to love me? Of course. I do love you. Isn't that how you've made me? Farewell, good. May you find...
So the Eye of a Blood-Drunk Hunter beckons hunters to the Hunter's Nightmare. A deformed creature will whisk you away outside Erden Chapel. So that's referring to the amygdala outside the Erdene Chapel, and then we get that eye right there. So I wanted to zoom in and re-listen to that Doll's dialogue about the Healing Church and their hunters, just for like collecting footage. So please forgive me for this.
Welcome home. What is it? Hunters have told me about the church, about the gods and their love. But do the gods love their creations? I am a doll created by you humans. Would you ever think to love me? Of course. I do love you. Isn't that how you've made me? Farewell, good hunter. May you find your worth in the waking world.
So the Doll's dialogue right there is really, really interesting, and a lot of people wonder if what it is really getting at is whether the humans of the Bloodborne universe were a creation of the Great Ones, and whether or not the relationship between the dolls and humans is paralleled between like the humans' relationships and the gods. And so I think it's pretty safe to say like the Great Ones in Bloodborne can be considered essentially like godlike beings to the characters of the game. They're described as being close to gods, I think, in one like the Great One Cold Blood description, something like that. And one of the things that this brings up is what relationship we really do have to the Great Ones. Like so, since the doll is created by men, she is made in such a way that she feels that she has to love men, because that's in accordance with the way that we made her nature. And so, do the humans in Bloodborne love the gods because they feel that they've been made that way? I'm a little bit skeptical of that belief. I think this might just show or highlight that the doll is a bit naive in believing the hunters of the Healing Church, because she seems to exist on like an extra planar level, and so she should potentially have like a more intimate understanding of like the Great Ones potentially than the players do, because of her knowledge of Flora of the Moon of the Dream, and etc. etc. So when we look at some of the characters in the game that we've met so far, they don't really seem to express a lot of admiration or love for the gods, especially when we compare it to like our real life religions. It seems more like they want to compete with gods and usurp their position and become something greater than humans. They want to become gods themselves, whereas like the doll doesn't necessarily seem to want to become human like Pinocchio or anything like that. She just almost seems to content to like nurture or care for humans and to love them in the capacity that she's been created. So I think there is a kind of like fundamental difference between the doll and the human, although I guess one could argue like the reason why she's that way is like we didn't endow her with that kind of ambition to become greater than she is. So take that as you will. It's just very fascinating dialogue to think about. I like to think of this as something more like along the lines of what you'd get out of like a novel like Frankenstein, and something more representative of like romantic literature, and something that falls in line with that like Gothic and Victorian aesthetic. So I don't think Garamond will be back. Oh, he is. It's interesting. I don't think his dialogue should be different.
Oh, Lawrence, what's taking you so long? I've grown too old for this. Of little use now, I'm afraid.
Right, so this is the same as what we got before. It's interesting that he showed up again, but I'll take it.
Oh.
I don't think killing Amelia gives anything from the insight bath either. So with that done, let's go back to the Cathedral Ward. See if Adella's gone crazy. And I think we'll probably call it after that and maybe go see like patches as the first thing the next playthrough. And for everybody who stopped by and has been supporting me on this lore run, I want to thank you again for coming to another stream. We have been doing this every night at starting at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you are coming in late and wanted to see more of this run, I've been uploading these episodes onto my YouTube, and you should also be able to check the VODs on Twitch if that's where you are right now. So after defeating Amelia, we have progressed the state of the night. It has become a full night, and so the NPCs will have new dialogue. We see the lonely old woman like clutching her head.
Oh, how did we ever get into this mess?
So after this, she will become actually a lot more friendly and receptive to the player. So it seems like Adella still has not gone into full aggro deranged mode despite having killed Ariana and still being red-handed in doing the deed.
Oh, forgive me,
And so I don't think the the narrow-minded man is going to say anything different either. Alright. And same thing with the little beggar, or the dweller rather.
Was it a beast? Oh.
Alright, so that'll be it for now, and we did pick up the Eye of the Blood-Drunk Hunter. I'll go ahead and read that now, or I'll also probably read it when we go into the DLC. But that won't be for a while yet. So this is the Eye of a Blood-Drunk Hunter. Its pupil has collapsed and turned to mush, indicating the onset of the Scourge of Beasts. A hunter who goes drunk with blood is said to be taken by the nightmare, destined to wander forever, engaged in an endless hunt. It is a fate that no hunter can escape. So this right here does support the idea that like the dreams and things like that are a kind of purgatory or an afterlife in the Bloodborne universe. It doesn't seem as though everyone gets taken to them. Hunters are certainly ones who get trapped in this one, so whether or not people who haven't taken blood are sent to an equivalent kind of place is a bit unknown. So we'll talk a lot more about that when we get to the DLC later. So once again, I want to thank everybody for stopping by, and tomorrow we'll be going through the Forbidden Woods, and see you next time.